What schema matters? Hello, this is the Knowledge Panel Show, episode 2. I'm Dixon Jones, CEO of InLinks.net, and my producer is here, David Bain of Casting Cred. How are you today, David?
I'm very well, thanks indeed, Dixon, and all the happier for joining such a wonderful panel of experts talking about schema today.
Going to be great. And if anybody wants to ask questions, by the way, please do. Where are we streaming and when can people ask questions?
Sure. Well, we're streaming in 3 different places at the moment. We're streaming on the InLinks channels on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitter. So wherever you're watching, please add your views, ask questions if you've got questions, and we'll try our damnedest to incorporate them as part of the conversation today.
Okay, brilliant. And today's question for the knowledge panel under the microscope is what schema matters. And I think we've got a fantastic panel. So why don't we go from, as I see them, from top to bottom. So Jason, why don't you introduce yourself first? Tell us who you are.
Oh, right. Great. Thank you very much, Dixon. Lovely to see you all. A wonderful panel. Wonderful question as well. I'm Jason Barnard. I'm the brand search guy. I'm obsessed by brand search, which is what appears when somebody Googles your brand name or your personal brand name. A lot of people think, I don't need to worry about that. I rank number 1, so the rest of it doesn't matter. And it does. It matters because it's your business card. People look you up, whether they're about to do business with you or whether they're already doing business with you. It's also a window into your digital ecosystem. You can see where things are going wrong with your reputation, and it's also a window into your content strategy. So you can look at your content strategy. If, for example, you don't have videos ranking, maybe you should be looking more at your video strategy, and so on and so forth. So I think it's a great insight into lots of different aspects of who we are, what we do, and are we credible?
Okay, great. And Iman, do you want to introduce yourself and say hello to the world and who you are?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Iman Hamdan. So I'm a mother of 2, live in US, work for enterprises for almost 10 years and roughly till now, struggling to push all SEO or organic tactics in there. That's
it. Through Yahoo, right?
Yeah. For Yahoo now.
Yeah. We'll just plug the Yahoo bit because, that gives you permission to do it on time.
Yes.
And Martha, who's been in the industry for schema forever. Tell us about yourself and where your business.
Sure. My name is Martha Van Berkel, and I'm the CEO at ScemaApp. I'm coming to you live from Canada today. And ScemaApp is an enterprise solution that also provides full service schema markup. So any type of schema on any type of site, give us the most complex, challenge us with the hardest things, and we'll sort of help you through that entire journey. And you'll get to experience a little bit of the ScemaApp experience. I'm really excited to talk not just about code, which is schema markup, but how you kind of turn that into business strategy. And I'm also a mom. I love that Iman led with sort of I'm also a mom and an avid rower. So I've been enjoying some of the summer on the water.
Right. And you've also got some research which we're going to dive into in a little bit as well. So that's great. So before I dive into your research though, firstly, I've got to say the event is hosted by InLinks. So if you haven't tried InLinks.net yet, please go and try it. It's got a free forever version for 20 pages, and it will create about schema for you and internal links and kind of work out what your entities are and do some content optimization as well. So please do try that out. But before I start and before I get onto the research that Martha's got, if we ended up today without discussing one thing, what would it be, Jason and Iman? Because I don't want our audience to go without answering the central question: what schema matters? So, Jason, go on first. What schema matters to you?
Well, my big thing is the knowledge panel, and I love the title of the show because it perfectly suits what I want to talk about. Schema markup related to the knowledge panel, and how important it appears to be. I mean, I've been doing lots of experiments, so on events and on people and on blue and yellow cartoon characters and TV shows and music groups and songs and all sorts of stuff. And sometimes I do experiments with my clients, but I try and avoid that. But yeah, schema markup in relation to the knowledge panel is the one thing I would really be disappointed if we missed.
All right. Okay. Iman, what about you?
So mine is the interesting one, but I'm not easy to to deploy. It is text to the speech, hopefully we can discuss that. Other than that, it's the basic schemas that we always deploy in the enterprises is the list is really basic for me.
Okay, but you know what? I mean, text to speech is really interesting. So hopefully we'll have time to do that. But before we get onto either of those, then Martha, you've just done a whole load of stuff around rich snippets and stuff. Maybe pull out a few pointers of the research. What did you do and what did you find?
Sure, and just a little context to start. So we work with sort of all different sizes of businesses, from small, mid, and large, and we've been trying to start asking ourselves the question on like, how do we look at, which schema should you do? What schema actually matters? And I think the way to do that is to look at the data. And part of, I think if you were to ask me like what schema matters to start, I would say, well, what matters to your business, right? So I think it always kind of comes back to, what kind of content are you trying to get your customers to engage with? Who are you trying to be known for? It plays a little bit to Jason's sort of brand piece. But then again, specifically like what questions are being asked and how do you sort of engage and entice that customer in? But I think what's also interesting is we have been seeing quarter over quarter a change in sort of what rich results are performing. And so if you kind of think about like what the business is and then what might be an appropriate rich result, or in our question that we're always asking at ScemaApp is, is this a viable strategy to get to your business outcome? And FAQ has been one that we've seen a lot of changes. There's been lots of conversation. Marie Haynes and others we've all been observing this sort of up and down with regards to FAQ throughout July and August. And so we sort of asked the question of like, what's the best performing rich results? And I thought I'd share just like the top four. So top four that we're seeing sort of with regards to clicks around the click area, led by products, followed by job listings, FAQ, and reviews. So a lot around e-commerce, right? So product and reviews, and we do know there's a lot of changes in reviews recently. Around impressions, it's a bit different. Reviews and FAQs lead. So reviews, FAQ, product, and job listing. And then click-through rate is again another mix. And Jason, you'll love this. Videos kind of leads click-through rate. Job detail, but then also FAQ and reviews. So I think it's just interesting because it is a mix. And the reason why FAQ is interesting is because I think it is something that is very flexible, that if you know how to properly nest schema markup, that you can use FAQs across your different type of content. So just more coming from ScemaApp around research and primary research and sort of especially sort of building it out around FAQs. Again, one of our value adds as sort of like the in-house research that we perform to make sure we're using data to inform our strategies for our clients.
Okay, amazing. I've just found out that the questions from Facebook appear on my screen, which is absolutely amazing because I'm nowhere near Facebook right now. So Chris Labatt's on. Hi, Chris again. And he's just jumped in on Iman's point. Is speakable schema still valid? I heard that Google deprecated the type. I was looking at the Google schema page today, and it seemed to be there. So it seems to be there. So a good chance to jump in, and I'll go and get a link to the Google page I was looking at.
So it hasn't. I haven't seen it deprecated. I'll pile on. I think the thing that's interesting is that last May, so May 2019, Google released How To and FAQ, and it's interesting and you also can look at kind of question and answer, which is a bit different from like QA page, which is a bit different from FAQ. But this is sort of asking people to structure their content in a question and answer format or in a process, right? So How To is sort of when there's a different process. So where Speakable first came out, it was sort of like specifically to highlight areas within larger bits of text that you wanted to be used for voice assistance. But then in May, they said voice assistants would be reading all schema, and then they gave you this, I'll say like easier way without using XPaths to call out question and answer. So I would say like we haven't seen it come out of beta for a long time. It's still very focused just on sort of news and media type of sites. I would say sort of they might be seeing the same value of the structure coming from FAQ, and so maybe it's less important. That would be my Martha opinion on that.
So is anyone seeing text to speech coming out when I don't use OK Google, I don't use Alexa, and I don't use whatever Cortana or whatever I hate them. I hate them all. I'm sure it's all going to come back to me. But is Google reading out the text on pages very well on phones?
Well, I had a client, and we actually a very kind of corporate, big B2B company, and we actually got quite a few with the feature snippets. We got quite a few text reading out, and I agree. I mean, I tend not to use OK Google or whatever it would be, and I used it for them to test it out, and we were quite successful just with FAQs. So I think maybe Martha's right, but as you said, it's still on that developers page, and it just says beta.
Okay, so it's not deprecated so much as it's in beta. Okay,
but then it was.
Can I bring up a related but different experience that I think is interesting? So I don't know if anyone else has seen sort of where you search for something and then in the actual, page, they've highlighted in yellow sort of a portion of the page. And so there's for sure some natural language processing going on where they're extracting phrases within the content already without speakable that is then enhancing that search experience, even with, I'll say like yellow highlight on the page after it shows you that result. And that's from the featured snippet. So I would say like there's things going on that sort of mimic speakable, but in sort of, I'll say generic search results.
But also go ahead.
Yeah, I meant they mentioned that in the guidelines. So in order to help that kind of that kind of schema to be held up by that kind of like 20 seconds of that kind of content to be speakable. So I didn't test it, but it's just like it's really interesting to see that. But as you mentioned, it's supposed to be highlighted, or like it's supposed to be like cleared enough to be picked up. So I don't know.
Sorry, just to come back to what Martha was saying, it's something I find really interesting. On my podcast, I interviewed Ali Alvi, who's the Q&A, which is what Bing called the featured snippet. And he was basically saying that the feature snippet runs on along the same lines with the same algorithms as the snippets under the blue links. The snippets under the blue links are not part of the same algorithm as the blue link ranking algorithm, which is incredibly interesting. And the feature snippet is called a feature snippet because it's a snippet that's featured, which is brilliant. And he was saying what they do is they go through the entire page and they summarize it, which is why Google are now saying, oh, please do write your meta descriptions, because it helps them confirm their summary is correct if your meta descriptions are written honestly. But they summarize the page and then they try and guess what the implicit question is that page answers, in which case they can then match the question the person answers, asks to the implicit question the document answers from their own summary, using for Bing it's Turing and for Google it's BERT. There you go.
Yeah, so I mean that summarizing the page I think is really obviously that's where InLinks kind of comes in, because it tries to read the entities that are on that page. So runs an NLP program and pulls out the entities that are on the page, and then we turn that into web page schema and do same as Wikipedia articles to try and show Google what it's about, because we know that Google, understands the concepts and the underlying entities in Wikipedia. So that's kind of the our thing, but it doesn't really show up in rich snippets or in feature snippets in any way, shape, or form. But we do think it gives a much better understanding for Google of the underlying page and content. So, I don't know if you disagree, Martha. So is web page about schema something that you use very much?
No, because I'm a big believer in, and it kind of comes to my what's important to the business, like what is the page actually about? And within the schema.org vocabulary, there's over 800 different classes to describe everything from not animals, but everything from different types of businesses to services to medical areas, finance concepts. And so I really believe sort of as you call out what the page is about or other things, you can do that inherently within that very specific schema class. And so that's sort of, I'll say, like foundational to how we think at ScemaApp, which is sort of, how do we use one of those most specifics? And then we actually do entity linking now sort of at scale, using, again, sort of those correct properties within that specific type. But I think it's a good, web page is a good step forward. Like, I think it's better than nothing as a way to start describing the topics, similar to how Yoast, does some things with their plugin. It's just, I think there's a more specific approach that you can take should you have the right resources.
Yeah. Okay.
I find comments that just come back to your point with saying, oh, this entity is in the page and here's a reference to it in Wikipedia or Wikidata or whatever it might be. I was working with a client today on that, and it's astonishing how ambiguous a lot of things that we as human beings see as very clear. BT, EE are two companies I was trying to look at in the page, and for them it was incredibly obvious, and for me I've got no idea what BT and EE mean. And actually disambiguating must be a very strong and helpful signal to Google.
I absolutely agree, and I think that there's also you can. And a human setting those up tends to make mistakes. I mean, AI makes mistakes as well, but it's very easy to. I was just doing a demo just before we came on air, and it was aperson.com, and I was doing a one-to-one, and this person's name came up as an entity, and I said, do not link your name, this person, to this entity, otherwise this person is going to be coming up as a national as a football star instead of as a lawyer, and so you've got to get those associations right if you are going to use. Web page and about schema, same as schema particularly. Okay, we just got Sam Gooch coming up with a question. I heard FAQ markup has recently been showing up less frequently in Google SERPs. I recently added FAQ markup for some key pages, but none are showing up. Are you seeing less of these at the moment? Well, Martha, you did the research. And you said it's going up and down.
I have an answer. Yeah. So starting about July 15th through the 17th, we saw, I'll say, like a first decline. And we've seen about 3 different scenarios. So one, we've seen what I call a drop in loss, which means that it dropped on the 15th or 17th and it hasn't really recovered. So clicks and impressions have continued to stay low if you're looking at Search Console and the performance report for FAQ. A second scenario that we've seen is where they dropped on the 15th and then they sort of didn't drop all the way to the bottom, but they sort of maintained, I'll say, like a less frequency, but sort of at a steady rate. And that one we're seeing the drop and sort of maintain. Right now, our analysis is looking at that sort of the finance area is sort of where we didn't see the total loss. E-commerce is where we saw sort of things sort of not recover as quickly. And then the third area, I call it the drop and bounce, which is where on the 15th, 17th, it came right down. We saw it sort of recover a little bit on like the 24th, 25th of July. And then we actually saw it dive bomb again on the 4th of August. And then some of them we're seeing recover. And sort of within our clients, like people around the health area is where we're seeing more of this kind of drop and bounce area. We are just about to start our next level analysis on it to understand, was it sort of the application of FAQ? So again, was it a pure FAQ page where it just had FAQ on it? Or was FAQ nested sort of as part of a collection or under a blog or as part of a collection page, or sort of where it fell in, so that we can then sort of answer to our clients that question of like, okay, we're seeing this by industry, but we're also seeing the strategy imply it. So we'll have some answers likely by the end of the week.
So this industry thing is really interesting, that you know, different types of schema are prevalent in different kind of industries. I mean, obviously that's going to be, you know, if you're going to be talking about local businesses or geographical areas or things, there's going to be different types of schema. But is it not surprising that FAQs are more likely to appear in certain industries and not others? Or do you think that's just par for the course? Or do you think there's separate algorithms targeted at industries and verticals?
I'm trying to figure that out based on sort of what the application of FAQ is, to see if that has had, you know, sort of a different lens to look at it. It just happens that we are seeing, like, you know, I'll say like relatively large groups of clients in those related industries. So I know Marie Haynes, like often, and Lily Ray, and a lot of their analysis, they're seeing sort of groupings on sort of the different types of industries. And so in our analysis, we're seeing something similar.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, within my kind of brand SERP collection, which is now 70,000 brands every month, so I've got millions of these things, I've divided it into categories, and I'm seeing enormous differences in brand SERPs and also knowledge graph presence between different industries. I mean, obviously the knowledge graph is one thing within the music and entertainment and books, publishing industries, a lot of knowledge graph presence, a lot less in other industries. So there is enormous differences between these verticals, I think, in any kind of SERPs and results. I
guess, but do we think that that's a a active algorithm that's trying to say, right, this is an industry and therefore this kind of thing? Or do you think that's just, I guess we don't know. I guess we don't know whether it's done algorithmically on purpose or a function of the kind of content that people are writing about and the way in which they're writing. Okay, let's move on then. You talked about event schema then a little earlier on, Jason, actually. So you love event schema in knowledge panels. Tell me more about that. You might have said that before he came on air, but
no, I actually said it live, so I can no longer hide from it. What it said was, I noticed that SEMrush got into the knowledge graph not because of their Wikipedia page, but through their events. I was tracking them on the knowledge graph API, and their events turned up a long time before they did, and then suddenly they popped in, and that was during the Budapest update that I wrote about on Search Engine Journal last year, when a lot of the knowledge graph presence actually changed, but the confidence scores went right up. People went out, people came in, entities went out, entities went in, and events took a big push upwards. So I've been thinking, okay, they've done things like books and films and music have been very well catalogued online traditionally by fans, and a lot of other areas have not been catalogued in that way, in a manner that Google can actually rely on the data they're finding on things like IMDb or Music Brains. And events is one example where they can start to get a grip. And what appears to have happened is COVID obviously has changed the picture completely, because all these events and local business as well, we can probably look at that as well. COVID changed the game because they suddenly had to react and start making the events in the knowledge graph much more reactive to time. They're much more time sensitive. And what I've done is I created Kalicube Tuesdays, which was just an excuse to have my podcast online because I couldn't go to events to record them. I've had Martha on the podcast when we were at Brighton SEO, I think it was, which was absolutely amazing. That was face to face. Now I have to do it online. So we do, I got the event, I created the event. And so what I'm now doing is creating this event. It's an event series. You'll like this, Martha. Event series with lots of events in it, with people who are entities, with topics who are entities, me who's an entity, my company that organizes an entity, and two sponsors, WordLift and SEMrush, who are also entities. And now if you look in the knowledge graph, Kalicube Tuesdays is attached to me, WordLift, SEMrush, John Lincoln, Jez Schultz, Ted Rubin, Rand Fishkin, and basically I'm kind of barnacling onto all these people. And a lot of that, I mean, obviously, it isn't Schema Markup that made it happen, but the support of Schema Markup is very, very, very important. The Schema Markup I'm putting on my site supports what I'm putting on YouTube, what I'm putting on Crunchbase, LinkedIn, Eventable, where else have I put it? Eventbrite. I mean, I've really gone to town on this, but it all comes back to that Schema Markup, I think. And if I change the Schema Markup, there are reactions to that change in Schema Markup. It works less or better depending on how well I've actually applied my Schema Markup and how consistent I am across the whole thing. And I'm obviously, Martha's looking at big chunks of data. I mean, this is just me and my silly podcast that happens once a week. So I've got like 15 examples. So I can't say,
I love it.
Well, I can't say this is how it happens, but I can say this happened for me. And the really cool thing was I got my first sprout in the knowledge graph was Ted Rubin, who isn't in the knowledge graph. So I was surprised. I thought it would be somebody like Rand Fishkin, who is. Rand Fishkin didn't get in the knowledge graph through his Kalicube Tuesdays, and now he has. But what happened was it took me months to get the first one, days to get the second one day to get the third one, 5 hours to get the next one, and then 10 minutes to get the last one. 10 minutes from when I posted to when it actually appeared in the knowledge graph API. And I got the sprout, the knowledge panel, which is astonishing.
That's amazing.
Sorry, I get overexcited.
Can I build on something though that you're saying though, that I think it's just another tidbit fact that I find really interesting. So we've had Schema.org has released more releases. I think we're up like to 8 or 9 this calendar year, more than any other previous year. So previous years we saw like 4 or 5 releases of Schema.org. And the reason I build it on is that like actually we saw COVID actually change it so that they were really increasing the number of properties and ways that you could describe your events. And then the most recent release that we just saw, which I believe is 9.0, there's actually quite a lot about collections of products, which is kind of interesting. So, you know, it's not, I'll say it continues to accelerate. And what I think is really exciting is that, during COVID, I would say like one of the things we've all learned is around agility and sort of being able to change. And we're seeing a lot of that coming from the vocabulary, in sort of preparation for sort of the evolution of more people, more shopping, organizing, different types of events, et cetera.
Iman, do you want to jump in or just listen to these guys?
It is a very interesting topic. It's like, these content is really evaluating all the kind of schemas, but it's unfortunately I didn't have that kind of exploring in my enterprise background because it's really lack of these schemas. In order to test these things, to see them, it's really not easy. It's really hopeful. What are you talking about, Martha? And this topic, but it's really awesome to have that kind of evidence replicated in through FAQs or any specific articles like that. But it's really not easy to replicate it over there.
No, I really love. I really love the idea, and I don't know if this is something we can actually rely on, but the idea that whatever schema markup you use is always going to be positive as long as it's accurate. Yes. Simply because it confirms and corroborates and gives Google confidence that it correctly understood what was in the page in the first place. And if you look back to this Ali Alvi example, they're looking at the page, they're analyzing it, they're summarizing it, they're pulling out chunks, putting them together to create the snippets under the blue links made out of multiple parts of text from different parts of the page. And any schema markup you can give them that can corroborate and support what it is they think they've understood algorithmically is always going to be very helpful. And the meta description example I was talking about earlier on, that also is very helpful because it's more help, more corroboration for them that their machines, or for the machine, that it's correctly understood. And that gives it confidence. And I like the idea, if the machine is confident, it will put it front and center. If it isn't, it will try and kind of like push it down a bit because it isn't really 100% sure.
Yeah.
So Dwayne, I'll get to Dwayne's question if we got time, but just on that point. There is. Well, I'll bring it up now. I'll come back to Google's guidelines at the end if we got a chance. So Dwayne says, does performing NER now, is NER natural entity recognition or natural language? Anyway, I'm going to go for natural language processing. Does performing entity analysis, I'm guessing, shout if I'm wrong, on content and then annotating those in structured data with about or mentions to DBpedia URI help to disambiguate those terms. So I think rephrasing that question is using same as with about and mentions to help Google understand what a page is about or what the content within a page is about. If you're linking those to DBpedia URLs, help to disambiguate the terms. So I'll go first, and I'm happy if you guys shout me down and say no. I think that DBpedia, yes, possibly, but I don't think that it's as powerful as Wikipedia. But you can use Wikidata or DBpedia or Wikipedia. But the problem is that I think DBpedia is quite a long way behind Wikidata in terms of being seen as a trusted data set, but I might be talking rubbish. Anyway, I think that if they are getting it right, then it should help to disambiguate. Yes. Martha, you can disagree with me now.
No, actually, I'm going to agree with you.
Oh, thank God.
So yes, so we, like, way back when, like 2015, when we first started doing this, we often used Wikipedia or DBpedia definitions around local business. So defining cities, defining regions, like area served for local business is a really great one. Or often if you were using like additional types, so if you want to enhance a local business type, for example, because there's no marketing or agency, you could use that as sort of an additional type. And DBpedia, one of the things that we like about DBpedia is that it's sort of a kind of language agnostic type of definition of things. And so that's actually great. So if you're actually looking for like the entity to describe it, where we've evolved kind of our thoughts on this is sort of to also include Google's knowledge graph entity now, since that sort of like if it's for Google and it's their own entity, that makes it easier. And I think you can use it, about and mentions. I think in our ScemaApp Live webinar last week, someone was asking me the difference between those. Like, about is a very strong connector. So like, this is about this topic, whereas mentions is a bit of a softer kind of relatedness. And then I'll guess the last thing I'll just add is like, we are doing some testing to say like at scale, what is the impact of doing this? But we just kicked that off last month, so we don't have enough data yet to share on that.
So yeah, so I think obviously I use the about a lot, but I think what's interesting about Google's NLP API is Entity API is we've got a metric which we call Search Engine Understanding, and it's comparing the number of the entities that we see versus the entities that Google is saying they see in their knowledge graph, and it's really interesting to see that Google. It's picking out a lot of things with capital letters, shall we say, which is part of a patent as well. But it's not picking out concepts very well, and it's not defining concepts. So it's really good at brands. It's really good at locations. It's really good at places with a capital letter. But it's not so good at picking up concepts that humans understand as specific entities and ideas, and I think that's where Wikipedia and DPpedia and same as a schema for about schema really can help myself.
Coming back to about and mentions, I mean, what Martha says is very true. I was using ScemaApp, and it encourages you to say this page is about, or this article is about this thing, and the idea is it's about one topic. And Jonah Alderson says this very well, that Google like it when a page is about one entity, or it's a very simplistic kind of view of the world, that it tries to get a grip on a page that talks about one topic. Which is fair enough in many ways. And then you can have multiple mentions, and that disambiguation that we were talking about earlier on, the multiple mentions will help to disambiguate the entities within the page and better clarify the topic. And I did an experiment with my cartoon characters, and I had one page with all the cartoon characters on them. There were 5 yellow koalas and 4 blue dogs. And Google did okay, and I got them in the knowledge graph, and I was getting my feature snippets. It was all I had my knowledge panels, and it was all terribly fun. And then I split them into one page each. So you have 9 pages, one for each character, and then did all the relationships between them. This one's mother, this one's mother or father or wife or husband or child, and it actually exploded. Like we've multiplied the confidence score by 8. By splitting them down into their individual pages. So it's a page about Daddy Koala, and it mentions Mummy Koala, who's his significant other, and that's brilliant. Daddy Koala is a fictional character, and his significant other is Mummy Koala. I just can't get enough of that one. It's so silly. And you can get your knowledge panel with that.
I have to worry about Jason's sanity as he's sitting there doing all these relationships between cartoon characters. It's
to be honest with you, literally last night at 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and I was worried about my sanity.
We all are,
what Jason's building on, though, kind of relates to Dwayne's follow-up question, though, which is right, like defining the relationships between things, right? Which is the key thing, right? So whether it be mentions and sort of Google recently announced that it wants you to nest things and use @IDs in order to define like what are the, where is this actual thing defined? And I think that plays a little bit, Jason, to what you were just saying around sort of when you connect these things, ideally then you're also connecting those other things so that then we understand the reverse relationships as well.
But that also comes into every entity has its home, which is kind of what these characters come down to. And my experience, Dixon, we were talking about Wikipedia a while ago, and I had my Super Wikipedia page, and we say in French, narguer, which means I went, nya, 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 nya to you, which was very unfair of me. And then I talked about it again to Craig Campbell on his show, and the Wikipedians just wiped all my pages off. They wiped off my page, the blue dog, the yellow koala, and my folk punk group. And I thought that entire knowledge graph presence would collapse. And in fact, the knowledge graph presence has improved. I now have control over what's being said about all these entities, except my own. And mine has completely collapsed in a heap because I moved the schema markup from my homepage to a page within the site. I moved my home, and Google just freaked out and dropped it and created a new entity within 24 hours, which I find it's got persistent memory. Once it's got you in there, you will just keep popping back whether you want to or not. And what I find interesting is Wikipedia, whatever the rights and wrongs of what happened is, it was me who messed it up at the end of the day because I moved my schema markup in an attempt to improve things. So I think coming back to the beginning of all that is find a home for your entity and stick to it.
Okay.
Which comes to the question of what schema matters, and it's like the things that describe the things that are important to you and your business, right? So, and depending on what kind of business or person you are, it's still those things, right? So, I don't know. I always kind of come back to like it's about business strategy of like what's actually important to your business, and then how do you make sure that those things are being found and understood, and then how do you see if you can get rich results for those as well.
Right, I just realised the mistake I'm making. Yellow dogs and blue dogs and yellow koalas are not important to my business, but I'm spending lots of time on them, which is why.
Which is back to the sanity question there, John.
Yes.
I feel we're cutting you out of the conversation there. Happy we're all, anything you want to dive in and say?
So I'm listening to them to have more experience in these stuff. But anyhow, just like talking about these, schema markups is very important, and having them really strategically in such companies like Yahoo or some other enterprises is really important. But they deprioritize these stuff because it's like, they have much more new products or releases to have to be deployed more than that kind of things. That's to make them understand. But, adding to these, topics that you're discussing, guys, having these analysis by numbers, that would be help to justify these, by case studies, each one of them, but, to show these cases for that kind of peoples, that will helpful a lot because to build up in these cases and estimate, or to show them that kind of cases with no numbers, they will not accept these projects, just from my standpoints. But showing the case knowledge graph or having any specific schemas over there, it's really not important for them as much as having revenue. So
hopefully things like this will start to help companies realize that there is a direct correlation between paying attention to the schema and revenue, and I guess that's our job to build that market up. Right, I want to leave with one question, if that's okay, and that is Google guidelines. They say, and I'm going to quote from the Google guidelines page on all the schema stuff, so that page that if it hasn't come up in notes or anywhere, I'll put it up in an article afterwards, where Google's is actively supporting some kind of schema, but they're just being very quiet about other ones, I think, really. But Google guidelines say you must follow these guidelines for your app to be eligible to appear as a rich result. That's kind of on every single almost every single one of the pages of schema that they're supporting. Warning: if your site violates one or more of these guidelines, then Google may take manual action against it. Once you've been remedied the problems, you can submit your site for reconsideration. So my question to you is, why does Google feel that the need to penalize people for bad schema? Iman, do you want to go first on that?
So I believe the misuse of that, it's the one I knew. It's like the duplicative schemas, of having the same entity, same bad directions. That's, I believe, it's going to be penalized to it. That it's been tested and seen, because it's like, you're misleading the search and misleading the people to the same content, which is the duplicate thing. So that's what I tested, and I don't like it. I've seen it's been penalized, these pages, and de-ranking them.
Yeah, and when we had when I was in my Majestic time, when we had a score for every single domain, we wanted to put that in as sort of review schema, and John Muller told me that would be a very dangerous thing for us to do, because it was automating reviews, which would be a bad idea. But any other reasons why, Jason or Martha, why it's the guidelines are so hot?
Well, I think. Go ahead, Jason.
Oh, no, I was literally just going to say, obviously kind of people do it to get those rich results and get the little products and in stock and the stars and all that stuff. And everybody thinks, oh, I'll cheat on that and I'll get away with it. And then, or they see their competitors cheating and they think, oh, why don't I cheat? And then they do. And that becomes an increasingly big problem for Google. I actually had a client who got slammed for pretending that local businesses were products, and it worked for them for a year. And the penalty was actually just they removed the rich snippets, and then as soon as they sorted it out, or I sorted it out for them, it came back. So in fact, the penalty wasn't so much a penalty as taking away something we shouldn't have had in the first place.
Yeah, so I'm seeing not as many penalties. Maybe it's because we build good schema, but previously we saw a lot of penalties around ratings and reviews, and a lot of it was spammy, right? So people trying to, I'll say, like, force the rating on however and as many pages as possible. And so I think, the change we saw in the reviews, especially for local business and around blogs and news articles and so forth, really kind of self-corrected that one. I think the other reason why people do it plays to what Iman's been talking about, especially in enterprise. Like, it's actually hard to make changes to content. And Jason, you said something at the beginning of this podcast that that really is one of my favorite things as well, which is, like, schema markup can help inform content strategy. And so I think people will sometimes be like, oh, I really, really want to get that rich result. Like, I can't make the change to the content yet, so I'm just going to put the schema markup on there and, like, hope to goodness
change it later. Yeah.
Yeah. When in fact, like, schema markup is a whole process where you can identify opportunities for rich results, but it actually then means, like, actually going back and revisiting your content and sort of thinking about how your content needs to change, making that change to content, and then capitalizing on the rich result. And so I think it's why ScemaApp exists. Like, we help people with that whole process and help them sort of, work with what they have today and then evolve it. But I think it's hard, to Iman's earlier point.
Right. The coming back to that, I mean, what I realized, I started doing an entity-based content model with WordLift using their application around my podcast. And the idea was, okay, the podcast or the podcast series is an entity. The podcast is each podcast episode is an entity. I'm an entity. The guest is an entity. The topic is an entity. We join all that together with relationships and we push the entire thing forward. And the first thing that struck me was how very badly organized it was in my own head, and how much wordless schema markup forced me to think it through. They were saying, how are we going to mark this up? How are we going to organize it? And that forced me to think it through. And it actually changed the course of the podcast, the way I was organizing it, the way I was developing it, because it made me think in a much more structured and logical manner. And I think, and obviously I would say this, it's made it better. I think the podcast is better now than it was a year ago. Mm-hmm. So do listen to it. Sorry, that was my promotion.
Okay, guys, I think we're nearly out of time. David, are there any burning questions I haven't asked, or are we okay on time?
I think we're fairly okay for questions. There's a couple of questions. There's one from Greg saying, I've used Schema for local businesses. Occasionally a blog post will get lots of love from Google and spread nationwide. The byproduct has been a very high bounce rate. Do you have a way to mitigate this?
Well, I would say, obviously,
that suggests Google got it wrong then.
Yeah, I mean, if Google's putting it out there, Google would be saying, we feel that this is valuable for the client, our client, their client, in the context they find themselves. And yeah, they're getting it wrong. But presumably what will then happen is they will see that this answer, because it's not local to the person who's saying it, is not satisfying them, and will then remove it. That's the theory behind it. But I mean, from Greg's point of view, if it's local business, if people are coming in to the site, looking at the content and saying this actually isn't interesting, the fact they're bouncing out is logical, and it isn't necessarily, or it isn't a problem. He just needs to make sure that the people who are in the area are seeing that content is relevant to them, focus on them, and don't think, oh, all this traffic's coming in, I've got to try and please everybody, because the people who aren't in that local area are not going to be well served by that business. So you're wasting your time.
Cool. Okay, guys. David, what's our next show? So that's pretty much everything we got time for. What's our next show? We got another one next month. I can't remember the date. First Monday of the month are we going for?
Absolutely. We're going to be looking into AI and SEO and how that ties together. So that's going to be broadcasting live on the InLinks Facebook page, on the InLinks YouTube channel, and of course the InLinks Twitter handle as well. So as soon as that gets scheduled, that'll be up there, and hopefully you can subscribe and watch us live there.
And if you guys want to find out where all those links are, if you go to the InLinks blog and type in the Knowledge Panel Show, we're going to we'll put the recording of this up there. We'll put previous recordings up there. And also, if you want to be notified of future events and stuff, then there'll be a web form up there as well. So everything you want to do. And if you think that you've got something that you want to be on a panel for, then, probably you can ask there as well. So pop into the Knowledge Panel Show at the InLinks blog, and you should be able to find it. So I'm going to say thanks very much for everybody for coming along. That's been an absolutely storming show. I guessed it would be, and a brilliant panel as well. If people want to know more about you, maybe sort of sign off by saying, how do they find more about you? Where can they get hold of you? Martha, do you want to go first?
Sure. So you can come to our website, www.ScemaApp.com. I'm also pretty active on Twitter under @MarthaVanBerkel. Or if you want to have a conversation and connect, you can connect with me on LinkedIn.
Iman?
Yeah, you can connect with me at LinkedIn too, but it's like, as Iman Hamdan. So that's the only social I have.
Yeah, which is apparently I pronounce wrong every single time. But anyway, we're going to carry on going now. Jason.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, you can find me on LinkedIn, you can find me on Kalicube.pro. If anyone wants to submit their brand to be tracked by Kalicube, we track them for free. We've got 75,000 brands that we're tracking. Aim for us is to figure out kind of how brand subs work, how to get into the knowledge graph. And I'd just like to say to end that if the future is entity-based search, being recognized an entity and being in the knowledge graph is the be-all and end-all, so start now.
Very good. If anybody wants to have a demo of InLinks, go for d9.ms/30, and that will be my Zoom calendar, and you're welcome to hook up with me. And it just leaves me to say thank you, David, for my production team. Otherwise, I'd have made a mess of it many a times. Thanks, Martha. Thank you, Iman, and thank you, Jason. And hopefully see you all next month. Cheers. Bye, guys.
Thank you, Dixon.
Bye.
Yeah.